I stood in my studio, brush poised over canvas, as another voicemail from my mother played through the speakers. Sophia, darling, you really must attend the opening. The Winston Museum is the biggest thing to happen to this family since your great-grandfather founded Winston Industries. Your brother has worked so hard to make this happen. I let her voice fade into background noise, focusing instead on the interplay of light and shadow in my latest piece. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family was about to open a $100 million art museum while still considering me the family disappointment for choosing to become an artist. Growing up as Sophia Winston meant carrying the weight of generations of industrial success on your shoulders. My great-grandfather built Winston Industries from nothing. My grandfather expanded it across continents, and my father transformed it into a global powerhouse. Then came my brother, Michael, the golden child who would shepherd the family legacy into the modern era. And me? I was the rebel who chose paintbrushes over profit margins. Art won't pay the bills, Sophia, my father would say, his voice heavy with disappointment. It's a hobby, not a career. The memory of that conversation still stung, even now, 10 years later. I had just graduated from high school, portfolio in hand, acceptance letter to the prestigious Art Institute clutched like a lifeline. I got a full scholarship, I had argued, trying to make them understand. They only accept 12 students a year. My mother had dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. Darling, think about your future, the family name. Michael is already at Harvard Business School, following the path laid out for him. I am thinking about my future, I'd insisted. My art is everything to me. My father's response was cold, final. Then pursue it without our support. We won't fund this. Rebellion. I left that night with nothing but my savings, art supplies, and an unshakable determination to prove them wrong. For years, I lived in a tiny apartment, working as a waitress during the day and painting through the night. My family's disappointment followed me like a shadow, manifesting in subtle digs at mandatory holiday gatherings. Still dabbling with your little paintings? Aunt Margaret would ask, voice dripping with false sympathy. You know, we're always hiring in the mailroom, Michael would offer, his generosity a thinly veiled insult. What they didn't know was that I had found my own path to success. Under the pseudonym Southwest Blake, my work had begun gaining recognition in the art world. It started small, a few pieces in local galleries, then larger shows in prestigious venues. Critics praised the depth of emotion, the innovative techniques, the raw honesty of my work. Meanwhile, my family remained blissfully unaware, too caught up in their own world of corporate acquisitions and profit margins to notice the rising star in the art world who shared their DNA. Even when my pieces started selling for 6 figures, they still saw me as the wayward daughter working in a coffee shop to support her hobby. The ultimate irony came 3 months ago. Michael, now CEO of Winston Industries, decided to establish the family's legacy in the art world. The Winston Museum would be a testament to their cultural sophistication, housing one of the most expensive private collections ever assembled. We've acquired some extraordinary pieces, Michael boasted at the last family dinner I attended, including several by that reclusive artist, Southwest Blake. The art world is obsessed with them. I nearly choked on my wine. Really? How interesting. Yes, though they're frightfully expensive, my mother added. Michael paid $8 million for just one painting. Can you imagine? I could imagine quite well, considering I was the one who had painted it. If only you had their talent, Sophia, my father sighed. Then your artistic pursuits might have amounted to something. I excused myself early that night, claiming a shift at the coffee shop. In reality, I had to finish a commission piece that would sell for more than Michael's yearly salary. The secret of Southwest Blake's identity had become my armor, protecting me from their judgment while allowing me to build my own empire in plain sight. Now, standing in my real studio, not the small space my family thought I rented, but a converted warehouse in the city's arts district, I surveyed my latest works. Tomorrow they would all be unveiled as the centerpiece of the Winston Museum's opening gala. Every single piece in the modern wing bore my signature, though my family had yet to make the connection. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the museum's curator, Isabella Torres. She was one of the few people who knew my true identity and had become both a close friend and a co-conspirator in tomorrow's revelation. Everything is ready, her text read. Your family won't know what hit them. I set down my brush, stepping back to examine the final piece I'd been working on. It would be my gift to the museum. A massive canvas depicting a Winston family portrait from my childhood, but with a twist. In my version, the figures were shadowed, indistinct except for a young girl holding a paintbrush, her face turned toward the light. My phone rang again. This time it was Michael. "Sophia, you were coming tomorrow, right? The whole family will be there. It would look bad if you weren't." I smiled, thinking of the surprise that awaited them. "Don't worry, brother dear. I wouldn't miss it for the world." After hanging up, I walked through my studio, passing paintings worth millions that would soon hang in my family's museum. Each one held a piece of my journey, the pain of rejection, the struggle to find my voice, the triumph of success on my own terms. A message from Isabella popped up on my phone. "Final walkthrough in an hour. Sure you're ready for this?" I texted back a single word: ready. Tomorrow, the carefully constructed facade would crumble. Tomorrow, my family would learn that the failed artist they had dismissed had become the very artist they had spent millions collecting. Tomorrow, every painting in their $100 million museum would reveal its true creator. But tonight, I had one final piece to complete, a self-portrait that would hang in the museum's entrance. In it, I stood in my studio, brush in hand, my signature bold and clear: Sophia Winston Blake. It was time for Southwest Blake to step into the light. The Winston Museum's grand opening sparkled with all the ostentation you'd expect from my family. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over marble floors, champagne flowed freely, and the city's elite mingled in designer evening wear, pretending to understand art. I arrived early, dressed in a simple black gown that would have made my mother wince. No designer labels, no family diamonds. Tonight was about my art, not the Winston name. "There you are." Isabella rushed over, her curator's badge gleaming. "The press is already here, and your family is doing preliminary interviews. Are you ready?" I watched as Michael held court near the entrance, explaining his vision for the museum to a group of journalists. Our parents stood nearby, beaming with pride. "I've been ready for 10 years, I replied. The modern wing, where most of my work hung, was still curtained off. It would be the highlight of the evening's unveiling, the mysterious Southwest Blake collection that had cost the Winston family a fortune. "Sophia," my mother's voice cut through the crowd. "Darling, you really could have made more of an effort. This is a black tie event." I smiled, remembering the 3 similar gowns in my closet that had each cost more than her entire outfit. "I came to support the family, Mother. Isn't that what matters?" "Yes, well," she glanced around nervously. "Try not to mention your hobby tonight. We're telling everyone you work in art acquisition." "Don't worry," I assured her. "Everyone will know exactly what I do by the end of the evening." The crowd grew as 8 o'clock approached. Art critics, collectors, and social elite filled the space, all eager to see the mysterious Southwest Blake collection. I overheard snippets of conversation about the reclusive artist's identity, each theory more outlandish than the last. "Welcome, everyone." Michael's voice boomed through the speakers. "Tonight marks a historic moment for both the Winston family and the art world. The Winston Museum represents not just our family's dedication to cultural excellence, but our commitment to bringing the world's finest art to our city." Our father joined him on the small stage. For generations, the Winston name has stood for innovation and success in industry. Tonight, we expand that legacy into the realm of fine art. I felt Isabella squeeze my arm. "Ready for your cue." Michael continued his speech. "The centerpiece of our collection, and the piece I'm most proud to present, is the complete works of the acclaimed Southwest Blake. We've spent years acquiring these pieces, and tonight, we finally unveil them to the public." The curtains began to rise, revealing my work one piece at a time. The crowd gasped collectively as each painting came into view. I heard critics murmuring in appreciation, collectors discussing the millions they'd offered for similar pieces. "These works," Michael gestured grandly, "represent the largest private collection of Southwest Blake's art in the world. Their unique vision, their masterful technique, it's an honor to provide them a permanent home." And who better to tell us about these magnificent works? Isabella stepped forward, right on cue, than the artist herself. The room fell silent. Michael's smile froze. "Ladies and gentlemen," Isabella continued, "it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Southwest Blake, or as her family knows her, Sophia Winston." I walked onto the stage, taking the microphone from my brother's limp hand. The shock on my family's faces was worth every moment of the past 10 years. Thank you, Michael, for those kind words about my work, I said calmly. You're right, these pieces do tell a story. My story. The room erupted in whispers. Cameras flashed. My mother swayed slightly, steadied by my father's rigid grip. Each painting here represents a chapter in my journey, I continued, walking toward the largest piece, the reimagined family portrait. This one, for example, was inspired by the night my family told me art was a waste of time. It sold last year for $12 million. Michael found his voice. This is impossible. Sophia works in a coffee shop. Actually, Isabella cut in. Sophia hasn't worked in food service for 8 years. She's been rather busy becoming one of the most successful artists of her generation. The Southwest Blake collection is valued at over $200 million. My father stepped forward, his face a mask of confusion and dawning realization. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked. You were so convinced I was a failure that you never bothered to look closely at my success. Even when you were spending millions on my art, you couldn't see me. The evening devolved into chaos after that. Press members clamored for interviews, art critics revised their analyses of my work knowing the Winston influence, and collectors suddenly remembered my remarkable talent from my early coffee shop days. My mother, recovering her composure, attempted to take control. Darling, we always knew you had potential. This is wonderful for the family name. No, Mother, I cut her off. This isn't about the family name. Every piece in this collection was created by Sophia Winston Blake, not the Winston fortune. I built this on my own, despite your lack of faith. The anonymous donor, Michael whispered, realization dawning. The one who helped fund the museum, that was you. I nodded. Consider it my gift to the family, a reminder that success doesn't always wear a business suit. In the weeks that followed, the art world buzzed with the revelation of Southwest Blake's identity. The value of my work doubled overnight, though I refused to sell any new pieces to my family. They would have to earn the right to collect my art. Gradually, things changed. My father started asking genuine questions about my technique. My mother stopped introducing me as our daughter who works in art acquisition, and began proudly showing photos of my studio to her friends. Michael took longest to come around. But one day, he visited my studio, my real studio, unannounced. I was wrong, he said, studying my latest piece. We were all wrong about you. Yes, I agreed, not looking up from my canvas. You were. The thing is, he continued, I never really looked at art before. Not properly, but your pieces, they tell stories. Important ones. I finally turned to face him. Every artist tells stories, Michael. You just have to be willing to listen. He nodded slowly. I'm listening now. Today, the Winston Museum still stands as one of the city's premier art institutions. My work fills its modern wing, each piece a testament to the power of following your own path. The family portrait hangs in the entrance, reminding visitors that sometimes the black sheep of the family might just be creating a masterpiece. When young artists ask me about success, I tell them the truth. Talent matters, hard work matters, but believing in yourself when no one else does, that matters most of all. And sometimes the sweetest victory isn't proving others wrong, but proving yourself right. As for my family, they finally learned to see me, not as the failed artist or the rebellious daughter, but as Sophia Winston Blake, the artist who turned their $100 million museum into a priceless collection with a single signature. And that signature now stands boldly on every piece, a testament to the power of passion over expectations, of art over industry, of being true to yourself even when everyone else demands you change. After all, every great artist knows. Sometimes the most beautiful masterpieces come from the darkest doubts. I stood at the window of my penthouse office, watching the city lights flicker to life in the growing dusk. 50 stories below, employees were leaving work for the day, including my father, mother, and sister, though they had no idea they were working in my building. 10 years ago, they'd thrown me out of our family home, calling me useless, a disgrace, a disappointment. Now they worked for my company, Nova Technologies, without knowing I was the founder and CEO. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ms. Parker, my assistant Sarah's voice came through the intercom. Everything's set for tomorrow's company-wide meeting. Are you sure about this? I smiled, touching the glass. Yes, it's time they knew. The night they kicked me out was burned into my memory. I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in computer science, not the law degree they'd wanted me to pursue. What kind of career can you have with computers? My father had sneered. Real success comes from connections, prestige. My sister Diane was the golden child, top of her class at law school, engaged to a senator's son, everything they'd wanted in a daughter. I was the disappointment who spent too much time coding and not enough time networking at country club events. The final straw came when I turned down a position at my father's law firm to work at a tech startup. If you're too good for this family's help, he'd roared, then you're too good for this family. They'd given me an hour to pack. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me throw clothes into a duffel bag. "This is for your own good, Emma," she'd said. "Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they can succeed." Diane had smirked from behind our mother. "Maybe now you'll learn what real life is like instead of playing with computers all day." I left with $200 in my pocket, a laptop, and an idea that would change everything. The startup I joined was working on revolutionary AI technology, but their management was a mess. Within 6 months, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. That's when I saw my opportunity. I approached venture capitalists with a plan to buy up the company and restructure it. They were skeptical at first. I was young, unknown, with no business experience. But my pitch was solid, my understanding of the technology unmatched. I got the funding. By 25, I had turned the failing startup into Nova Technologies, now one of the fastest growing tech companies in the country. But I kept my identity private, operating through a series of holding companies. The public face of Nova was our COO, while I worked behind the scenes. 3 years ago, Nova bought the downtown office building where my father's law firm was struggling to pay rent. Instead of evicting them, I had my HR department offer them positions. My father became our legal counsel. My mother joined as an office manager. Diane, whose prestigious law career had stalled, took a position in our contracts department. I watched them through the building's security cameras sometimes. My father, his hair now more gray than black, hustling through the lobby each morning. My mother organizing office parties, trying to network her way up the corporate ladder. Diane, her designer suits a little less pristine these days, always looking slightly desperate to prove herself. They loved working at Nova. I heard them bragging about it at family events I wasn't invited to, information gathered through the extensive network I'd built over the years. A truly professional environment, my father would say. Finally, a company that recognizes talent, my mother would add. If they only knew that the mysterious CEO they speculated about was the daughter they'd thrown away. Now, standing in my office on the eve of the biggest revelation of my life, I thought about the journey. The nights spent sleeping on friends' couches while coding. The meals skipped to pay for server space. The endless meetings with investors who couldn't see past my age and gender. Sarah knocked softly before entering. "The presentation is ready for tomorrow. All employees have been notified of the mandatory meeting." I turned from the window. "How many people do we have now?" "Just over 3,000 in this building alone," she replied. "Your family is scheduled to be in the front row." I nodded, picking up a framed photo from my desk, the only personal item in my minimalist office. It showed a much younger me at my college graduation, before everything fell apart. I was smiling, unaware that within months my family would disown me. "Miss Parker." Sarah's voice was gentle. "Are you having second thoughts?" I set the photo down. No, they need to know who they've been working for, who they threw away. The company meeting tomorrow wasn't just about revealing my identity. We were announcing Nova's latest innovation, an AI system that would revolutionize legal research. The irony was perfect. The daughter they dismissed as useless had created something that would transform their precious legal profession. My phone buzzed, an email from my father, sent to his department head. "Looking forward to finally meeting the CEO tomorrow. I have some suggestions about restructuring the legal department." I smiled. He still thought he knew best, still believed his connections and traditional approach were the key to success. Tomorrow would change everything. Sarah handed me a folder. "Your speech for tomorrow. Though I suspect you won't need it." 10 years, I mused, taking the folder. 10 years of building this company, of watching them work here without knowing. Tomorrow they'll finally understand what they threw away. But as I looked out over the city again, I realized this wasn't about revenge. It was about showing them, showing everyone, that success doesn't always look the way they expect. Sometimes it comes from the person they least expect. The The one they underestimated, the one they called useless. Sarah, I called as she reached the door. Make sure the security team is ready. Tomorrow might get emotional. She nodded, understanding. We both knew that when my family realized who really owned Nova Technologies, who really signed their paychecks, who really controlled their futures, the reaction would be explosive. But I was ready. I hadn't built an empire by being afraid of confrontation. Tomorrow, the daughter they'd thrown away would show them exactly what useless looked like. The company auditorium was packed. 3,000 employees filled every seat, the air buzzing with anticipation. For 10 years, Nova Technologies' CEO had remained a mystery. Today, that would change. I watched through the two-way glass of the preparation room as my family took their places in the front row. My father straightened his tie, probably rehearsing whatever speech he planned to give the CEO about legal department improvements. My mother smoothed her skirt, no doubt planning to mention her many social connections. Diane checked her makeup, likely hoping to finally meet the person who could advance her stalled career. 2 minutes, Sarah murmured, handing me a bottle of water. I took a sip, studying my reflection. Gone was the uncertain 22-year-old they'd thrown out. In her place stood a CEO in a perfectly tailored suit, someone who controlled not just a company, but an empire. The COO took the stage, beginning his introduction. I waited in the wings, listening to him list Nova's achievements, the AI innovations, the market dominance, the revolutionary new legal research system we were announcing today. And now, he said, the moment you've all been waiting for. Please welcome Nova Technologies founder and CEO. I stepped into the spotlight. The auditorium fell silent. Then I heard it, my mother's sharp gasp, my father's strangled sound of disbelief, Diane's coffee cup hitting the floor. Good morning, I said into the microphone, my voice steady. I'm Emma Parker, though some of you knew me by a different name once. Welcome to my company. The audience erupted in murmurs. Employees who'd worked with me for years were connecting the dots, realizing their mysterious CEO had been among them all along, quietly building something extraordinary. 10 years ago, I continued, I was told I was useless, that my interest in technology was a waste of time, that real success only came through traditional paths and social connections. My father's face had turned ashen. My mother gripped her armrests so tightly her knuckles were white. Those people who dismissed me, they've been working in this building for the past 3 years. In fact, they're sitting right here in the front row. All eyes turned to my family. Recognition dawned on faces throughout the auditorium, the legal counsel, the office manager, the contract specialist who'd spent years trying to network their way to the top. But this isn't about revenge, I said, my voice softening. This is about innovation, about seeing potential where others see nothing, about believing in yourself when no one else does. I clicked a button, and the screens behind me lit up with demonstrations of our new AI legal research system. Today, we're announcing technology that will transform the legal profession. Ironically, it was developed by someone who was told she was wasting her time with computers. The presentation that followed was flawless. The system was revolutionary, capable of analyzing millions of legal documents in seconds, predicting case outcomes with unprecedented accuracy, transforming how law firms operated. My father's face shifted from shock to understanding as he realized that his useless daughter had just made his entire approach to law practice obsolete. When the presentation ended, the applause was thunderous. Employees stood, cheering not just for the innovation, but for the revelation that their CEO had been one of them all along. Security quietly escorted my family to my office. I finished taking questions from excited employees, then made my way upstairs. They were waiting when I walked in, my father pacing, my mother perched on the edge of a chair, Diane staring out the window at the city below. How? My father finally managed. How did you build a multi-billion-dollar company? I finished for him. With the skills you dismissed, the technology you mocked, the determination you tried to break. Emma, my mother started, her voice quavering. We only wanted what was best for me. I sat down behind my desk, my real desk, not the modest workspace they'd seen me using. No, you wanted what looked best to your friends. There's a difference. Diane turned from the window. All this time, you were our boss. Ironic, isn't it? I picked up the graduation photo from my desk. The daughter you threw away ended up signing your paychecks. My father straightened, trying to regain some authority. Now see here, young lady. No, I cut him off. You don't get to play the father card now. You lost that right the night you gave me an hour to pack my life into a duffel bag. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. You're all excellent employees. Your performance reviews are consistently strong. You'll be keeping your jobs, though I suspect the dynamic at family dinners might be a bit different now. You let us stay, my mother whispered. After everything. Like I said, this isn't about revenge. It's about proving that success comes in many forms. Sometimes it comes from the person you least expect. They left my office looking shell-shocked, decades of superiority stripped away by the realization that the daughter they dismissed as useless now controlled their careers. The next few months brought changes they never expected. My father's suggestions for restructuring the legal department gathered dust. Our AI system made them obsolete. My mother's social connections meant nothing in a company where performance mattered more than pedigree. Diane had to accept that her sister, not her law degree, was her best path to advancement. But something else changed too. Slowly, they began to see me, really see me. Not as the disappointing daughter who wouldn't follow their path, but as someone who had built something remarkable on her own terms. Family dinners resumed, though now they were held in my penthouse. The conversations were different, less about status and appearances, more about ideas and innovation. They learned to listen, to see value in different perspectives, to understand that success doesn't always wear a lawyer's suit. I kept my old workspace in the building, sometimes still working alongside employees who now knew I was their CEO. It reminded me of why I built Nova, not to prove my family wrong, but to prove that anyone can succeed if they believe in themselves. The photo on my desk now has company, a new one, taken at last year's company picnic. My family is in it, smiling genuinely this time. We're not perfect, but we're learning. They're learning. And me? I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Running the company that proved useless was just another word for unlimited potential. The bell above my bookstore door chimed softly as I flipped the sign to closed. Another quiet Sunday at Jasmine's Books, my small corner of literary heaven nestled between a coffee shop and a vintage clothing store. The evening sun cast long shadows across shelves of carefully curated books, each one personally selected, each spine holding not just stories, but possibilities. My phone buzzed, a reminder about tonight's family dinner. I sighed, already dreading the familiar pattern of subtle insults and condescending remarks that awaited me at my parents' upscale penthouse. I changed into a simple blue dress, leaving my Jasmine's Books handbag on the counter. No point in dressing up when nothing I wore would ever be good enough for them anyway. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt endless. My sister Victoria's voice carried through the hallway before I even reached their door. The merger is worth $80 million. Can you believe it? I slipped inside quietly, but not quietly enough to avoid my brother Andrew's notice. Well, look who finally showed up. How's the little bookshop, Jasmine? Still managing to keep the lights on. The store's doing fine, I replied, hanging my coat by the door. At 32, I was the youngest of 3 siblings and, according to my family, the only failure. My mother emerged from the kitchen, perfect makeup and designer dress making me feel even more underdressed. Jasmine, darling, you look tired. Running that little shop must be so exhausting. If she only knew that I'd spent my morning on a conference call with investment bankers, orchestrating a deal worth more than her entire penthouse. But I just smiled and took my usual seat at the massive dining table. Victoria couldn't wait to dominate the conversation. So the merger with Global Tech is almost finalized. Once it goes through, I'll be named Senior Vice President of Operations. That's wonderful, sweetheart, my father beamed. He turned to me, his smile fading slightly. Jasmine, have you given any thought to selling the bookstore? Andrew knows some real estate developers who might be interested in that location. I took a sip of wine to hide my expression. Those developers worked for one of my investment companies, though of course my family didn't know that. I'm happy with the store, I said simply. Books are my passion. Andrew snorted. Passion doesn't pay the bills, little sister. While you're playing shopkeeper, Victoria and I are making real moves in the business world. If they only knew about the empire I'd built while playing shopkeeper. My small bookstore was just the tip of a very large, very profitable iceberg. It had started 7 years ago, shortly after I opened Jasmine's Books. A regular customer, an elderly man named Mr. Chen, would spend hours in the philosophy section, occasionally sharing his wisdom about life and investments. What my family didn't know was that Mr. Chen was one of the most successful private investors in the country. One day, he'd looked up from his book and said, "You understand people, Jasmine. You know what they want to read, what moves them. Have you ever thought about applying that understanding to investments?" That conversation changed everything. Mr. Chen became my mentor, teaching me to see patterns in markets that others missed. I started small, investing my modest savings in carefully chosen startups and undervalued companies. My first major success came when I spotted a small tech company that had developed an innovative payment processing system. I invested everything I had, then watched as the company's value multiplied tenfold in 18 months. I reinvested those profits, building a diverse portfolio that soon became Jade Capital Partners, named after my favorite shade of green. Though officially listed under a series of shell companies, no one knew that the quiet bookstore owner was the founder and CEO of a billion-dollar investment firm. While my siblings bragged about their corporate titles and million-dollar deals, I was quietly acquiring controlling interests in companies across multiple industries. My network of investments now included technology firms, real estate developments, and yes, even some publishing houses. Earth to Jasmine. Victoria's sharp voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Were you even listening? I was telling everyone about my new beach house." "Sorry, just thinking about tomorrow's inventory," I mumbled, playing my part. "We're getting a new shipment of classics." My mother sighed dramatically. "Darling, you're not getting any younger. Don't you want more from life than just books?" I thought about the 3 homes I owned, including a private island off the coast of Greece. "I'm content, Mom." "Content?" Andrew scoffed. "That's just another word for settling. While you're contentedly selling paperbacks, I'm closing a deal that will revolutionize the real estate market." I hid a smile, knowing that the revolutionary deal he was so proud of was actually being financed through one of my subsidiary companies. He had no idea he'd been negotiating with his little sister's firm for the past 3 months. The rest of dinner passed in its usual pattern. Victoria and Andrew competing to showcase their success. My parents beaming with pride at their accomplished children, and everyone taking turns expressing concern about my modest lifestyle. "I just worry about your future," my mother said as I prepared to leave. "You can't run a tiny bookstore forever." If she could see my investment portfolio, she might worry less. But I just hugged her goodbye and headed home, not to my apparent small apartment above the bookstore, but to my real home, a penthouse that made my parents' place look modest. As I walked into my private office, screens came to life showing market data from Asian exchanges. My actual workday was just beginning. While my family thought I spent my evenings reading novels, I was managing a global investment empire. Tomorrow would change everything. Victoria's precious merger, Andrew's revolutionary real estate deal. They were both about to collapse. Not because I planned it that way, but because my siblings had built their success on appearances rather than solid business principles. When the market opened tomorrow, they would discover that their companies were worth far less than they claimed, and when they desperately needed help, they would learn that the only person who could save them was the sister they dismissed as a simple bookstore owner. I poured myself a glass of scotch, the same rare brand my father loved to brag about. Though mine was a much better vintage, and settled in for a night of work. The screens before me told a story more compelling than any novel. The story of an empire built in silence, of power wielded with purpose rather than pride. The bell above my bookstore would chime again tomorrow morning, welcoming another day of apparent simplicity. But tonight, I was orchestrating moves that would reshape my family's understanding of success. They thought I was wasting my time with books. They were about to learn that the greatest stories aren't always the ones you can read on a page. The morning everything changed, I was arranging a new window display at Jasmine's Books. My phone buzzed constantly, market alerts, frantic messages from Victoria and Andrew, missed calls from my parents. I let them all go unanswered, calmly placing each book in perfect position. The financial world was in chaos. Global tech stock had plummeted 60% overnight after whistleblowers revealed massive accounting irregularities. Victoria's merger was dead in the water. Meanwhile, Andrew's real estate empire was crumbling as his overleveraged positions came due. The bell above my door chimed. I turned to find Victoria standing there, her designer suit wrinkled, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. Jasmine, she gasped. Everything's falling apart. I need somewhere to hide. The reporters are everywhere. I gestured to my reading nook, where comfortable armchairs offered sanctuary among shelves of classic literature. Victoria collapsed into one, her composure completely shattered. The merger's dead, she whispered. My career is over. I don't know what to do. The bell chimed again. This time it was Andrew, looking equally disheveled. You won't believe what's happening, he started, then stopped short at the sight of Victoria. You too? I calmly walked to the door, flipped the sign to close, and locked up. I think we need to talk. Talk? Andrew laughed bitterly. What could you possibly say? While you've been playing with your little bookstore, the real business world is collapsing. I walked to my office in the back, returning with 3 folders. Actually, I have quite a lot to say. But first, I need you both to read these. They opened the folders. Inside were documents showing Jade Capital Partners' ownership stakes in their companies, along with detailed reports of their mismanagement and financial manipulation. What is this? Victoria's voice shook. How did you get these documents? Because I own them, I said simply. I own the documents, significant portions of your companies, and about 30% of the building we're sitting in. Andrew's face turned red. That's impossible. Jade Capital is worth billions. They're the ones who've been financing my real estate projects. Yes, I nodded. I know, I'm the one who approved those loans. Silence fell, broken only by the gentle whir of the ceiling fan and distant traffic outside. My siblings stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. You, Victoria whispered. You're behind Jade Capital. I took a seat behind my desk, an antique piece worth more than most cars. Did you ever wonder why I chose this location for my bookstore? This building is owned by one of my holding companies. That coffee shop next door? Also mine. I own most of this block. But you're just a bookstore owner, Andrew sputtered. No, I corrected him. I'm a bookstore owner who also happens to run one of the largest private investment firms in the country. The bookstore isn't a fallback or a hobby. It's the heart of everything I do. It reminds me why I started investing in the first place. I pressed a button under my desk. The back wall of my office slid aside, revealing a state-of-the-art trading floor. Screens displayed real-time market data, news feeds, and investment analytics. While you were bragging about your millions, I continued, I was quietly building billions. Every time you mocked my little bookstore, I was probably financing your competitors or buying controlling interests in your partners. Victoria stood up, swaying slightly. Why? Why keep this secret? Why let us treat you like a failure? I finished for her, because success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about doing what you love and doing it well. I love books. They taught me to see patterns, understand human nature, and recognize value where others see nothing. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered, putting it on speaker. Yes, Mr. Chen. My old mentor's voice filled the room. The board is ready, Jasmine. Shall we proceed with the acquisitions? Yes, I replied, watching my siblings' faces. Execute as planned. After I hung up, Andrew found his voice. What acquisitions? Jade Capital is buying controlling interest in both your companies, I explained. At a very generous premium, considering their current market value is essentially zero. You'll both retain your titles, but the actual management will be handled by my team. You're taking over our companies? Victoria's voice rose hysterically. I'm saving them, I corrected her. Though you might want to check your messages. I believe the board has already voted to accept Jade Capital's offer. Just then, our parents burst through the front door of the bookstore, looking panicked. Victoria, Andrew, we just heard. They stopped short at the sight of my revealed office. My mother's hand flew to her throat. My father's face went pale. Hello, Mom, Dad, I said calmly. We were just discussing some business matters. Would you like to join us? The next hour was surreal. I explained everything. How I built Jade Capital from scratch. How I'd watched my siblings' companies implode through reckless management. How I positioned myself to save them while teaching them a valuable lesson. All those times we criticized you, my mother whispered. You were worth more than all of us combined. Money isn't everything, I reminded her, gesturing to my beloved bookstore. This place, these books, they're what make me happy. The success of Jade Capital just proves that you can build something extraordinary without sacrificing your passion. My father cleared his throat. But why keep running the bookstore? You don't need to. I don't need to do anything. I cut him off. I choose to run this store because it matters to me. Every person who walks out of here with a book that might change their life. That matters more than any merger or acquisition. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Victoria and Andrew learned humility as they worked under Jade Capital's management. My parents stopped pushing their version of success on me. The bookstore remained my sanctuary, though now they understood it was just one chapter in a much larger story. Mr. Chen visited more often, still browsing the philosophy section, still sharing his wisdom. One day, he smiled at me over his book and said, "You've taught them the greatest lesson of all. That true success isn't about what you show the world, but about staying true to yourself." I looked around my bookstore, at the shelves of stories that had inspired me, at the reading nook where children discovered new worlds, at the antique desk where I built an empire. You know what the best part is? I told him, I still get to read the best stories first. Today, Jade Capital continues to grow, but I still open the bookstore every morning. My siblings have learned to measure success differently, and my parents finally understand that the quietest person in the room might just be the most successful. And me? I'm exactly where I want to be, surrounded by books, building empires both literary and financial, proving that you should never judge a book or a person by its cover. The crystal glasses clinked against the marble dining table as my mother set down another bottle of champagne. The Morrison family's annual achievement dinner was in full swing, though I hardly felt like celebrating. My sister Victoria sat at the head of the table, practically glowing in her designer dress as she detailed her latest promotion. And just like that, I became the youngest VP in Marshall & Sons history, she'd announced, earning appreciative murmurs from our assembled family members. The CEO said my restructuring plan was brilliant. I took another sip of water, trying to blend into the expensive wallpaper of my parents' dining room. These dinners have become a tradition over the past 5 years, a chance for everyone to brag about their accomplishments while subtly undermining anyone who didn't meet the family's elite standards. Elizabeth, my Aunt Patricia's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. Still doing that consulting work. All eyes turned to me, and I could feel the judgment radiating from each carefully maintained expression. At 32, I was the family disappointment, the one who'd walked away from a prestigious position at Goldman Sachs to start my own consulting firm. Yes, I replied simply, but before I could elaborate, Victoria let out a dramatic sigh. Poor Elizabeth, still a nobody after all these years, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You know, we have some entry-level positions opening up at Marshall & Sons. I could put in a good word. She's just a consultant, my mother added with a heavy sigh, refilling Victoria's glass while pointedly ignoring mine. We had such high hopes. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my expression neutral. If they only knew that just a consultant was a carefully crafted facade. None of them had any idea that over the past 5 years, I'd built Shadow Peak Consulting into one of the most powerful firms in the industry, operating through a complex network of shell companies and subsidiaries. Well, not everyone can be as successful as Victoria. My father chimed in, beaming at my sister. She's about to close the biggest acquisition in Marshall & Sons history. The merger with Global Dynamics will transform the entire company. Victoria preened under the praise, but I had to suppress a smile. The Global Dynamics merger, if only they knew the truth about who really controlled that deal. Actually, I said carefully, I have some news of my own. Oh darling, my mother interrupted, perhaps save the small updates for another time. Victoria was just about to tell us about her new penthouse. I fell silent, watching as my sister launched into a detailed description of her luxury apartment's view. Let them have tonight, I thought. Tomorrow would change everything. Later that evening, as I drove back to my modest apartment, the one my family assumed was all I could afford, my phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus, my chief operations officer. Everything's set for tomorrow. The Marshall & Sons board has signed off on all terms. They have no idea what's coming. I smiled, thinking of the carefully orchestrated plan that would unfold in less than 12 hours. For 5 years, I'd operated in the shadows, building an empire while my family dismissed me as a failure. Shadow Peak Consulting wasn't just another firm, it was a powerhouse that had systematically acquired controlling interests in key companies across multiple industries. And tomorrow, Marshall & Sons would discover that their precious merger with Global Dynamics came with an unexpected twist. The company they thought they were acquiring was actually one of my shell corporations. The terms they'd so eagerly signed would give Shadow Peak Consulting complete control over Marshall & Sons. Victoria's career-making deal was about to become her biggest humiliation. I parked my car and took the elevator to my apartment, not the real one in the penthouse of the city's most exclusive building, but the modest space I maintained for family visits. Inside, I opened my safe and pulled out the final documents for tomorrow's reveal. The morning would bring the kind of dramatic revelation my family seemed to love so much. Only this time, the shock would be on them. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. Your name is already being added to the building. By sunrise, everyone will know who really runs Marshall & Sons. I poured myself a glass of wine, not the cheap variety my family assumed I drank, but a vintage worth more than Victoria's monthly salary. Tomorrow would mark the end of Elizabeth the nobody, the family disappointment, the just a consultant. Tomorrow they'd learn exactly who I'd become, while they were too busy looking down their noses to notice my rise. The next morning, I stood in my real office, the entire top floor of the Shadow Peak building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city skyline, including the Marshall & Sons headquarters where my name was being installed in gleaming letters. Miss Hamilton, my assistant Sarah appeared at my door. They're waiting in the main conference room. Your sister is quite vocal about the delay. I smiled, adjusting my tailored Armani suit, a far cry from the intentionally modest clothes I wore to family functions. How long have they been waiting? 20 minutes. Your father has mentioned his importance approximately 7 times. Perfect. I picked up my tablet and started toward the conference room. And the name change on the building. Just completed. It's visible from the conference room windows. I paused outside the heavy oak doors, hearing Victoria's sharp voice cutting through them. This is ridiculous. Do they have any idea who we are? When I meet this mysterious CEO of Shadow Peak, I pushed open the doors. The conversation died instantly. Victoria, mid-rant, froze with her mouth open. My father dropped his coffee cup, dark liquid spreading across the pristine white tablecloth. My mother's perfectly maintained facade cracked as her face went pale. Elizabeth? Victoria finally managed. What are you doing here? This is a private meeting for senior executives. I walked calmly to the head of the table, setting down my tablet. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the delay. Shall we discuss the terms of Shadow Peak's acquisition of Marshall & Sons? Acquisition? My father stood up, his face reddening. What nonsense is this? We're here to finalize our merger with Global Dynamics. Where is Shadow Peak's CEO? I sat down, smoothing my skirt. You're looking at her. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's designer heel clicked against the floor as she took an unconscious step backward. This is impossible, she whispered. You're just a small-time consultant. You work out of that tiny office downtown. That office. I smiled. It's one of our meeting spaces for local clients. Shadow Peak Consulting operates in 37 countries, Victoria. We own this building. I gestured to the window. And as of today, we own Marshall & Sons. My mother found her voice. But Global Dynamics is a subsidiary of Shadow Peak. I finished for her. Just like the investment firm that's been buying up Marshall & Sons shares for the past 3 years. Shares that give us controlling interest as of this morning. Victoria sank into her chair, her face ashen. The merger terms are non-negotiable. I pulled up the final contract on the room's main screen. Shadow Peak will assume control of all operations. We'll be restructuring the management team, starting with the immediate termination of the current vice president of operations. Victoria's head snapped up. You can't fire me. I'm your sister. Exactly why I should have noticed your incompetence sooner. I turned to my father. The board has already approved the terms. They did so last night after reviewing the company's complete financial position, including the creative accounting that's been hiding Marshall & Sons' real debt. My father slumped in his chair, decades of authority draining from his face. Why, Elizabeth? Why go to all this trouble? I stood up slowly, walking to the window where my name now crowned the Marshall & Sons building. 5 years ago, when I left Goldman Sachs, you told me I was throwing my life away, that I'd never amount to anything without the family name to prop me up. I turned back to face them. So I built something better, something bigger. While you were all laughing at my little consulting business, I was creating an empire. Sarah entered silently, distributing folders to everyone at the table. These documents outline the transition. I continued. Victoria, your security clearance has already been revoked. Human Resources will escort you out after this meeting. Mom, Victoria pleaded, turning to her mother who sat frozen in her chair. Do something. But there was nothing she could do, nothing any of them could do. Last night at dinner, I said, my voice cutting through Victoria's rising panic, you called me a nobody. You've spent years mocking my career choices, belittling my achievements, assuming my silence meant weakness. I walked to the door, then turned back one final time. I want you to remember this moment. Remember that the sister you dismissed, the daughter you devalued, now owns everything you spent your lives bragging about. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and legal requirements. Victoria was escorted out by security, mascara streaming down her face. My father avoided my eyes as he surrendered his company keys. My mother, for once, had nothing to say. Later that evening, I stood in my office, watching the sun set behind the city skyline. Sarah appeared with a glass of champagne, the same expensive brand my family had been drinking last night while mocking my supposed failures. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. All these years of hiding your success. I thought about the decades of condescension, the dismissive comments, the patronizing offers of entry-level positions. Then I thought about the empire I built, the thousands of employees who relied on me, the positive changes I could now implement at Marshall & Sons. It wasn't about revenge, I said finally. It was about proving that success doesn't always look the way they think it should, that you don't have to follow their path to build something meaningful. I raised my glass to the gleaming letters that now crowned the building. Elizabeth Hamilton, CEO. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most powerful. Sometimes the child they underestimate becomes the giant they must answer to. And sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in proving them wrong. It's in showing them that you never needed their approval in the first place. The following year brought changes no one in my family could have predicted. Marshall & Sons, under Shadow Peak's leadership, transformed into a more ethical, innovative company. Victoria eventually found a mid-level position at another firm, hopefully having learned the value of humility. My parents, their social standing shattered, stopped hosting their achievement dinners. And me, I kept building, growing, expanding, not to prove anything to them anymore, but because I discovered something they never understood. True success isn't about titles or family names or yearly bonuses. It's about creating something meaningful, something that lasts. These days, when people ask about my path to success, I tell them the truth. Sometimes the best response to those who underestimate you isn't to prove them wrong immediately. It's to build something so magnificent that when they finally realize their mistake, it's already too late to matter. The basement was cold again. I pulled my thin blanket tighter, listening to the laughter drifting down from upstairs where my family was celebrating my sister Isabella's new promotion. The familiar sound of crystal glasses clinking, of expensive shoes clicking against hardwood floors, of life happening above while I existed below. At 25, I was still living in my parents' basement, not by choice, but by their decree. Madison doesn't need a real room, they decided years ago. She's not going anywhere in life anyway. My sister Isabella got the master suite with its own bathroom. My brother Oliver had the room with the private balcony. And me? I got the unfinished basement with its concrete floors and exposed pipes, complete with a camping cot that squeaked every time I moved. The only person who ever treated me differently was Grandma Rose. While my parents lavished attention and resources on my gifted siblings, Grandma would sneak down to the basement with cookies and stories. They don't see your light, sweet girl, she'd whisper, but I do. Now Grandma was gone, passed away last week in her sleep. The funeral had been yesterday, a grand affair where my siblings had performed their roles perfectly. Isabella, the successful corporate lawyer, gave a touching speech. Oliver, the brilliant surgeon, shared poignant medical stories. And I stood quietly in the back, wearing the only black dress I owned, purchased from a thrift store. Madison. My mother's sharp voice cut through my thoughts, echoing down the basement stairs. Come up here. Your sister is making an announcement. I climbed the stairs slowly, emerging into the warm, bright kitchen that I was only allowed to use for basic meals. My family was gathered around Isabella, their faces glowing with pride. As I was saying, Isabella continued, barely glancing at me, the firm is making me junior partner. the youngest in the company's history. More crystal glasses clinked. More congratulations flowed. My father beamed with pride. "That's my girl. Always knew you'd make us proud." Oliver chimed in from his position by the expensive coffee maker I wasn't allowed to touch. Between my new position as head of neurosurgery and Isabella's partnership, the family name is really soaring. My mother nodded, then glanced at me with familiar disappointment. If only all our children had such drive. I thought about the secret I'd been keeping for the past 5 years, the online business degree I'd earned at night while they thought I was wasting time on my laptop. The small investment portfolio I'd built using the money Grandma had secretly given me, the patents I'd registered under a different name. But none of that mattered to them. In their eyes, I was just the family failure, the cautionary tale they used to motivate my siblings. "Work hard," they'd say, "or you'll end up like Madison." "Don't forget about tomorrow," my mother announced. "The will reading is at 10 a.m. Everyone needs to look presentable." She shot me a warning look. "Madison, please wear something appropriate. Maybe Isabella can lend you something." Isabella smirked. I doubt anything of mine would fit her. I retreated back to my basement, their laughter following me down the stairs. What they didn't know was that Grandma Rose had visited me 3 months ago, her eyes twinkling with her familiar mischief. "Everything's arranged," she had whispered, pressing a small key into my hand. "When the time comes, you'll understand. Just remember, sometimes the ones they underestimate are the ones who surprise them most." I hadn't understood then, but tomorrow at the will reading, everything would change. The next morning, I arrived at Mr. Patterson's law office wearing my thrift store dress. My family was already there, dressed in designer morning wear, clustered together and ignoring me as usual. "Now that everyone's here," Mr. Patterson began, adjusting his glasses, "we can begin the reading of Rose Eleanor Montgomery's last will and testament." The first few items were predictable. Family heirlooms to various cousins, small monetary gifts to longtime staff, donations to favored charities. My siblings shifted impatiently, waiting for the big revelations. "To my grandchildren," Mr. Patterson continued, causing everyone to lean forward. "To Isabella Montgomery, I leave my collection of legal books and journals." Isabella's triumphant smile faltered slightly. "Books? Just books." "To Oliver Montgomery, I leave my medical research papers and my father's old stethoscope." Oliver's face darkened. A stethoscope? Where was the money? "And to Madison Montgomery." My family didn't even bother to look interested. What could Grandma possibly leave the failure? "I leave the entirety of Montgomery Enterprises, including all subsidiaries, properties, and holdings currently valued at approximately $400 million. The room froze. Mr. Patterson continued reading. But no one was listening anymore. My mother's face had gone ghostly white. My father's hands were shaking. Isabella's mouth hung open in a most unladylike manner. "That's impossible," Oliver finally sputtered. "Grandma didn't have that kind of money. She lived in that little cottage." Mr. Patterson smiled, pulling out a thick folder. "Actually, Mrs. Montgomery was one of the most successful silent investors in the country. The cottage was just for show. She owned significant portions of multiple Fortune 500 companies, several tech startups, and extensive real estate holdings, all of which are now legally transferred to Madison." I thought about all those nights in the basement when Grandma would teach me about stocks, about business strategies, about seeing opportunities others missed. While my family thought she was telling me fairy tales, she was actually grooming her successor. "There must be some mistake," my mother insisted, her voice shrill. "Madison doesn't know anything about running a business. She's not qualified." "Actually," Mr. Patterson interrupted, "Madison has been secretly running most of Montgomery Enterprises for the past 2 years, under Mrs. Montgomery's guidance. The company's value has doubled under her management." My family turned to stare at me, as if seeing me for the first time. The basement dweller. The failure. The secret businesswoman worth hundreds of millions. But this was just the beginning. What they didn't know was that Grandma's empire was far larger than even Mr. Patterson realized. The key she had given me would reveal much more than just money. It would uncover a legacy that would change everything. After the initial shock at the law office, my family's reactions were exactly what I expected. Isabella immediately started citing inheritance laws, looking for loopholes. Oliver called his friend who specialized in contesting wills. My parents shifted between begging and threatening. Madison, darling, my mother's voice dripped with sudden sweetness. We should discuss this as a family. You're not prepared to handle this kind of responsibility. I stood up, smoothing my thrift store dress. Actually, I have a meeting to attend. Mr. Patterson, shall we? He nodded, gathering his briefcase. Yes, the board is waiting. Board? Isabella's voice cracked. What board? Montgomery Enterprises Board of Directors, I replied calmly. They're expecting their CEO. My father's face turned purple. You can't possibly. I've been acting CEO for the past year. I cut him off. Grandma just made it official. I walked out of the office, leaving them sputtering in disbelief. But I wasn't done, not even close. Grandma's key was burning a hole in my pocket, and I knew exactly where it led. The cottage where Grandma had lived was exactly as she left it, small, quaint, seemingly modest. But I went straight to her study, to the old painting of roses that had always caught my eye as a child. Behind it was a safe. The key fit perfectly. Inside wasn't money or jewels, but something far more valuable, documents. Hundreds of them. Property deeds, stock certificates, corporate ownership papers, and a letter written in Grandma's elegant hand. My dearest Madison, by now they know about Montgomery Enterprises. But that was just the beginning. While they were underestimating you, we were building an empire. The documents in this safe represent my true legacy, holdings in over 200 companies, properties across 6 continents, and controlling interests in some of the world's most successful corporations. Total value, approximately $2.8 billion. More importantly, they include evidence of your family's financial misconduct, your father's embezzlement, Isabella's insider trading, Oliver's medical insurance fraud. I kept it all, not for revenge, but for protection. Use it wisely. Love, Grandma. I sat in her old leather chair, reading through the documents with steadily growing amazement. The little cottage itself sat on land worth millions. The art on the walls, which my siblings had dismissed as cheap prints, were original masterpieces. My phone buzzed, multiple messages from my family. I ignored them and called Mr. Patterson instead. Is everything in order? He asked. Yes, I replied. Let's proceed with phase 2. Within hours, news of my true inheritance hit the financial press. My family's reactions were immediate and desperate. Isabella arrived at the cottage first, her designer heels sinking into the gravel driveway. Madison, we need to talk. I've been looking at the legal framework of the inheritance and technically, I interrupted. You should be more worried about the SEC investigation into your trading activities last year. She went pale. How did you? Grandma kept excellent records, I said simply, just like she documented Dad's creative accounting and Oliver's insurance schemes. You wouldn't, she whispered. We're family. Family? I stood up, finally letting years of hurt surface. Was I family when you all made me live in the basement? When you mocked every attempt I made to better myself? When you treated me like something stuck to the bottom of your designer shoes? My parents and Oliver arrived just then, bursting into the study with wild eyes. Madison, my father started. Let's be reasonable. Reasonable. I picked up one of the files from Grandma's safe. Like the reasonable way you diverted company funds to pay for Isabella's law school while telling me college wasn't for someone like me. Or the reasonable way you funded Oliver's luxury condo while I slept on a cot in the basement. My mother burst into tears, always her favorite manipulation tactic. We only wanted what was best. No, I cut her off. You wanted what looked best. You wanted perfect children you could brag about at country club lunches. You wanted success you could show off. Meanwhile, Grandma and I built something real. Built? Oliver scoffed. You just inherited it. I smiled, pulling up the company's financial reports on my laptop. See these profit margins? That was me. These successful acquisitions. Also me. While you were bragging about your achievements, I was quietly running one of the largest private investment firms in the world. Their faces shifted from desperate to shocked as they realized the truth. I hadn't just inherited wealth, I had helped create it. The basement apartment, my father said slowly, all those nights we thought you were wasting time online. I was earning my business degree, managing investments, running companies. I stood up, straightening my shoulders. Grandma saw what you never did. That success isn't about appearances. It's about substance. What are you going to do? Isabella asked, her legal bravado crumbling. The basement apartment is being renovated into a homeless shelter. The mansion is being sold. The proceeds will fund scholarships for underprivileged students. Montgomery Enterprises will continue growing, but with a focus on ethical investment and community development. And us? Oliver's voice was small. You get exactly what Grandma left you, books and a stethoscope. Consider yourselves lucky I'm not turning over the evidence of your financial crimes. They left eventually, shoulders slumped, designer clothes somehow looking cheaper than my thrift store dress. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, not just for me, but for every person they'd looked down on. The next few months brought changes they never expected. I moved the company's headquarters to a building that also housed a free medical clinic and legal aid office. I started a foundation helping underprivileged students pursue their dreams. The basement where I'd lived was transformed into a shelter that gave people a chance to rebuild their lives. My family? They adjusted, slowly. Isabella took a job at a public defender's office, humbling work that actually helped people. Oliver started volunteering at free clinics. My parents, well, they're learning that true worth isn't measured by country club memberships. I kept Grandma's cottage exactly as it was, though now I understand why she chose to live simply despite her wealth. Success isn't about showing off, it's about making a difference. Sometimes at night, I sit in her study, looking at the painting that hid her safe, and I can almost hear her voice. They didn't see your light, sweet girl, but now the whole world does. And she was right. The basement dweller they dismissed built something greater than their superficial success could ever be, a legacy of real change. That's worth more than all the billions in the world. My name is Marcus Chen, and for 15 years, my family thought I was just a janitor at Byte Tech Solutions. Every Sunday dinner was the same, subtle jabs, disappointed looks, and not-so-subtle suggestions about real careers. But what they didn't know was that while I was mopping floors at night, I was building something that would change everything. Marcus, you're 38 now. My mother sighed during our weekly family dinner, pushing her barely touched pasta around her plate. Don't you think it's time to find a real job? I kept my eyes on my food, letting the familiar sting of her words wash over me. Across the table, my sister Olivia adjusted her engagement ring, making sure the massive diamond caught the light. As a senior executive at Goldman Sachs, she never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of her success. Mom, leave him alone, Olivia said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Not everyone is meant for success. At least he's honest work. The way she said honest work made it sound like a terminal illness. My father didn't even look up from his phone. As the former CEO of a Fortune 500 company, he'd long since given up on having a son who would follow in his footsteps. Byte Tech Solutions, he muttered. Cleaning up after real technologists, at least you get to be near success, even if you'll never achieve it. If they only knew that Byte Tech Solutions wasn't just where I worked, it was where I learned everything I needed to know about building my own tech empire. It started 15 years ago when I graduated with a computer science degree from MIT. My family expected me to join a prestigious tech company or follow my father into corporate leadership. Instead, I took a job as a night janitor at Byte Tech Solutions. He's lost his mind, my mother had wailed when I told them. An MIT graduate choosing to be a janitor? Where did we go wrong? But I had a plan. During my final year at MIT, I developed an algorithm that could revolutionize how artificial intelligence processed natural language. The big tech companies would have bought it immediately, but I wanted to build something of my own. I needed time, access to high-end computing resources, and most importantly, invisibility. Byte Tech Solutions had everything I needed. As a night janitor, I had access to their entire building. No one paid attention to the quiet guy with the mop and bucket. No one noticed when I spent extra time cleaning the server rooms, studying their setup. No one cared when I stayed late, allegedly to polish the floors. During those late nights, while everyone thought I was just pushing a broom, I was learning everything about how a major tech company operated. I saw their mistakes, their inefficiencies, their missed opportunities. More importantly, I had unlimited access to their discarded equipment, perfectly good computers and servers they threw away during upgrades. In the basement of my small apartment, I built my own mini data center from their cast-offs. Every night after my shift, I worked on refining my algorithm, testing it, improving it. I lived on coffee and determination, sleeping just 4 hours a day. At least get your own apartment, my mother would plead during family dinners. Living in that tiny basement apartment at your age. What will people think? What they didn't know was that I owned the entire building. I bought it through a shell company when my first patent was quietly approved. The tiny basement apartment was just my cover. The real magic was happening in the secured upper floors, where I had built a state-of-the-art development facility. I called my company Phoenix Intelligence. The name was my private joke, rising from the ashes of discarded technology and overlooked potential. For 15 years, I operated in complete secrecy, using a network of shell companies and private investors who never met me in person. The janitorial job was my perfect cover. Who would suspect the quiet janitor was actually running a cutting-edge AI company? My algorithm evolved into something revolutionary, an AI system that could understand and process human emotion in real time. While other companies were still struggling with basic natural language processing, Phoenix Intelligence had created something that could understand the nuances of human communication, the subtle undertones of emotion in written and spoken words. Major tech companies started licensing our technology through our shell companies, never knowing they were dealing with the janitor who cleaned their offices. Byte Tech Solutions, my employer, became one of our biggest clients. I would sometimes sit in their lobby, supposedly on my break, watching executives rush past me to meetings where they discussed the brilliant technology from Phoenix Intelligence. As our success grew, I maintained my cover perfectly. I drove a 15-year-old car, wore second-hand clothes, and lived exactly as everyone expected a janitor to live. Every dollar I earned went back into the company or into secure investments. My family's disdain became my perfect camouflage. But everything was about to change. Yesterday, Phoenix Intelligence filed for its IPO. After 15 years of secrecy, the world would finally know who I really was. The timing wasn't my choice. Going public meant I had to reveal my identity as the founder and CEO. And tomorrow was my sister's wedding. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with extravagance. My sister Olivia had spared no expense for her wedding, inviting over 500 guests, most of them business executives and social elites. I adjusted my simple black suit, bought off the rack as everyone expected from a janitor, and found my seat at the far corner of the family table. "Marcus," my mother hissed as I sat down, "couldn't you at least have bought a new suit for your sister's wedding? And that tie?" She shook her head, looking around to make sure none of her friends had noticed her embarrassing son. I touched the blue tie I was wearing, handmade Italian silk that cost more than my mother's entire outfit. But of course, she assumed it was a cheap knockoff. Sorry, Mom, it was the best I could afford. The wedding ceremony was exactly what you'd expect from a Goldman Sachs executive marrying a tech billionaire. Olivia floated down the aisle in a designer dress that probably cost more than what they thought I made in a year. Her fiancé James stood at the altar in a custom tuxedo, looking every bit the successful entrepreneur they all thought he was. What none of them knew was that James's company was on the verge of collapse. His revolutionary AI technology was years behind what Phoenix Intelligence had already developed. In fact, his company had recently begged Phoenix Intelligence for a partnership, not knowing they were pleading with the janitor who cleaned their competitors' offices. During the reception, I sat quietly, watching the celebration unfold. The CEO of Byte Tech Solutions was there. He walked right past me without a glance, never recognizing the janitor who had mocked his office floors for 15 years. Half of Silicon Valley's elite were in attendance, and none of them had any idea that the quiet man in the corner owned technology that made their companies possible. And now, the wedding planner announced, "Please turn your attention to the screens for a special presentation about the happy couple." The massive screens around the ballroom lit up with a glossy video about Olivia and James' perfect love story. But suddenly, the video flickered and changed. A breaking news alert appeared. Breaking! Phoenix Intelligence, Silicon Valley's most secretive company, files for IPO. Mysterious founder finally revealed. I watched my family's faces as my photograph appeared on the screen. Not a recent one. The same ID photo I'd used at Byte Tech Solutions for 15 years. The news anchor's voice filled the ballroom. In a shocking revelation, Marcus Chen, known to many as a janitor at Byte Tech Solutions, has been revealed as the founder and CEO of Phoenix Intelligence, the AI company valued at $8 billion. Sources say Chen has operated in complete secrecy for 15 years, building one of the most innovative tech companies in the world while maintaining his cover as a maintenance worker. The champagne glass slipped from my mother's hand, shattering on the marble floor. My father's face had gone completely white. Olivia, the bride, stood frozen in her designer dress, her perfectly made-up face twisted in shock. The news continued, detailing Phoenix Intelligence's revolutionary technology, its massive client lists, and its impact on the tech industry. Every major company in that ballroom was named as our client, including Byte Tech Solutions and James's failing startup. Additionally, Phoenix Intelligence owns the patents for the AI technology currently used by over 70% of major tech companies. Industry experts predict the IPO will make Chen one of the 20 wealthiest people in the world. James, my new brother-in-law, swayed slightly. His company's survival depended on the partnership they'd begged for last week. Now he realized he'd been pleading with his brother-in-law, the janitor he'd mocked at every family gathering. I stood up slowly, straightening my cheap tie. The room had fallen completely silent, all eyes turning to the corner where the janitor sat. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for me. "Marcus, how? Why didn't you tell us?" I smiled, remembering every dismissive comment, every mockery, every time they'd made me feel small. Would you have believed me? When did any of you ever believe I could achieve anything meaningful? My father stood up, his business instincts kicking in. "Son, we should talk about this. As a family, perhaps we can discuss some synergies with our companies." "Actually," I said, checking my watch, "I have a board meeting in an hour. We're discussing which AI patents to license and which ones to revoke." James's face went even paler. His company's survival depended entirely on Phoenix Intelligence's technology. "Congratulations on the wedding, Olivia," I said softly. "Consider your husband's company's partnership approved. Call it a wedding gift from the janitor." I walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the shattered illusions of my family's perfect world. My phone buzzed continuously. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to the janitor who had outsmarted Silicon Valley. Outside, my driver waited with my real car. Not the old Honda I'd driven for show, but a custom Bentley I'd never used before today. As I settled into the leather seats, I thought about the past 15 years. The midnight coding sessions, the silent victories, the painful family dinners. My mother's words echoed in my head. "When will you make something of yourself?" I had made something of myself, something beyond their wildest expectations. But more importantly, I had done it my way, on my own terms, without their approval or support. The next morning, every major news outlet carried the story. The billionaire janitor, how one man built an empire in secret. My family's phones rang constantly with calls from friends and business associates, all trying to process the revelation that the man they'd mocked for years was now one of the most powerful figures in tech. Olivia cut her honeymoon short, rushing back to try to salvage relationships with clients who now knew her brother owned the technology their businesses depended on. My father's business friends avoided him, embarrassed by how they treated his son. My mother's social circle buzzed with gossip about how she failed to recognize her own son's genius. But I didn't care about their reactions anymore. In my office, my real office, not the janitor's closet, I looked out over the city skyline. On my desk sat a frame containing my old Byte Tech Solutions janitor ID, a reminder that success doesn't always wear a suit and tie. My assistant entered with a stack of messages. "Your family has been calling nonstop. Your sister left 15 messages about urgent business matters. Your father wants to schedule a dinner to reconnect. And your mother." I held up my hand, smiling. "Tell them I'm busy. I have some floors to mop." The truth was, I didn't need their acceptance anymore. I had built something remarkable, not despite their lack of faith, but because of it. Their dismissal had given me the perfect cover, the freedom to work without expectations or interference. As I sat in my office, reading the flood of news articles about the billionaire janitor, I realized that success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the best way to do that is to let them underestimate you. From my window, I could see Byte Tech Solutions building, where I'd spent 15 years watching, learning, and building my dream. Tonight, someone else would mop those floors. But the lessons I learned there, about patience, humility, and the power of being underestimated, would stay with me forever. After all, every empire has to start somewhere. even if it starts with a mop and bucket.